Good afternoon. Today is the 15th of January and it's time for yet another not particularly interesting, very vague and probably quite boring vlog. So I read an article recently about the most scrapped cars of 2024. It's from thisismoney.co.uk, and what it measures is the percentage of cars that were scrapped last year and what they actually were. So, for example, in 10th position, we have the Volkswagen Polo, which made up 1.7% of all cars scrapped last year. I suspect with a Polo, it's literally because there's just a lot of them around. In 2024, the Polo was actually the 10th best-selling car in this country, and it's been a big seller since it came out, really, in the 70s, more so 80s, 90s and 2000s. And the average age of a car that's been scrapped at the moment is about 17 years. So if you think about how many 17-year-old Polos are out there, we'd be looking at the 9N and the successor to that, which was, I think they call those the Mark 5 Polos, or Mark 4s. It sort of depends on how you call them, really. But yes, it was in 10th position. And then in 9th, we have the Peugeot 207, which was actually 2% of all the cars scrapped last year. Now, the 207 is a pretty bad car. I drove one many, many years ago in the very early days of the channel with the Prince engine, which you can't talk about, and it was terrible. The only ones we can talk about with 207s are actually the young ones with 1.4 TU engine. They're quite rare, but I wouldn't buy a 207 if you paid me. They're not very good at all. Next would be the Mini. The Mini is again about 2%. It's in 8th position, and it's the R50 and R53 we're looking at. That's slightly over that, actually 2.2%. Again, it's just because they actually sold quite a lot of them. They sold quite well, and you think about, we're going back about 17 years, so we're going to about 2008, which was when the R56 and R57 had come out, and again, they're not great. We've got Prince engines in them and really bad forbidden fuel engines, so it's not really a surprise there. Next is the Vauxhall Zafira. Zafira is about 2.3%, and again, I think it's a Zafira. We'd be looking at a Zafira B at the time, one with the terrible recall about catching fire and things. It's just because there's loads of them around. Some of the Astra H's, really, there are loads and loads of those around at the time, and they just don't have any value anymore. There's really no value. Not because of particularly bad cars, apart from the recall, but they're okay. It's just they don't have any value, and if something happens, like thermostat housing goes or use a new clutch or whatever, sometimes you have to replace the whole car. Next is the Renault Clio, and again, we'd be looking at a Mark III Clio. Now, those are reasonably good cars, actually. I drove one back in, I think, 2023. It would have been something like that. If I remember correctly, and it was all right, actually. It was a 1.4 from 2007, if my memory serves me correctly. So it's about the age that a lot of them would be scrapped now, and they're all right. I think it's literally just they're a very, very big selling car, particularly in Scotland. I think they sell a lot of them. On the continent, they're very popular, and about 2.5% of the number of cars scrapped last year were Renault Clios. Next is a Volkswagen Golf, and the Golf, it's about 2.6%. And again, I just think there's a lot of them out there. We did our comparison of the best-selling cars in 2018 and 2024. The Golf was one of the only cars that was on the list twice. We'd be looking at about 2008. So you'd be looking at a Mark 5 Golf, which had a lot of problems. Rust, electrical problems, some of the engines weren't very good. So again, it was basically almost a list of top 10 bestsellers, really, in some ways. And we got the Fiesta. Now, Fiesta, again, it would be around kind of 2008. So it would be just at the end of Mark 6 production. Again, Fiesta was a very, very popular car at the time, a really popular car. And, you know, a lot of them are in no budget reuse territory. So if something happens, like it goes rusty, or, you know, you got a problem with a thermostat housing or a cam belt snap, something like that, then you're going to scrap your Fiesta, regardless of what a good car that it was back in the day. And they were very good. But they made up apparently 4.4% of the entirety of the cars scrapped last year. Next is the Corsa, and again, this isn't really a surprise. Looking at about then a Corsa D, and the Corsa Ds were not necessarily that good. A lot of the people on YouTube who run car dealerships won't really want to buy the Corsa Ds anymore at that age because of the problems with timing chains, rust, electrical problems, suspension problems, things like that. So it's not a surprise, but again, they were just really, really popular cars. They were until actually about 2023 when they dropped out of the top 10 for 2024. Next is the Astra, and again, well, we're talking about an Astra H here from 2008. Astra H is not a bad car. My father-in-law's had one. He's had it for absolutely years. He's had it 14 years. He's had it. He got it in 2011. He had it a long time, and his one is okay. But again, they just were a lot of them around. They're very popular at the time, and they're just not worth anything. Even now, Astra H isn't really worth anything. And so, if you've got a problem with your timing chain, or a cam belt snaps, or thermostat housing, or something like that, or electrical faults, it's often more economical to scrap the car. Then we've got a number, which is I think it was at 5.6%, which was just Astras. The next number one spot is the Ford Focus, and the Ford Focus was an enormous amount of cars. It was almost like 7% of all of them were Ford Focuses. And again, it was a very popular car. And at the time of 2008, you're looking at a Mark II Focus. And a Mark II Focus is a nice driving car. You can get some very nice options and nice spec on one of those. But you don't look after it. If you have a problem with the core plugs rotting out on the engine, you've got rust problems on those. Again, there's just loads and loads around, and if they've been abused, it's often not worth actually replacing them. So that is a list, according to This Is Money, of the top 10 most scrapped cars of 2024.
Right, viewers, so here we are at the Rising Sun at Swanmore, near Southampton in Hampshire. It's a quite little place, as you can see there. Yes, my phone just vibrated, even got the radio unit off. Anyway, it's the way it normally goes when we slightly shambolic shuffle. So I'm not even sure we can cause a slightly shambolic shuffle because there's about 8 cars here today, which is why it's not a full video, it's part of the video. But anyway, we've got this 1960 MGA 1600 Coupe. I always think the door handles on this car are really, really weird. It's so strange. The standard MGAs don't even have external door handles at all. It's just for coupes like this. 1600s were the later ones, the earlier ones are a 1.5. Got the luggage rack on there. It's probably useful because the boots are probably quite small in there. Wire wheels as well. Excellent. Never driven an MGA. I've driven a couple of MGBs, not an MGA though. And then we've got this very, very nice 1970 Wolseley 1885. I have seen this before, I think probably at Lock's Heath. And that's actually where I found out about this little event. There's some others in this area that happen as well, but this is the one that's actually a weekday lunchtime, which is unusual for things in January. But I'm here anyway. This car actually wasn't originally sold. I think it was sold over in like something like New Zealand. The information, see here, there we go. Yeah, there it is. Originally registered in 1971, but made in 1970. It was imported over here in 2016. It's having a running recommission, which looks pretty good. Unusual colour scheme on this. I don't know if that's because it's from New Zealand or something like that. But yeah, it looks good. I have driven a Land Crab, but it was not an 1800. It was a manual. This one is an automatic, and the gear lever is in a really weird place in these. It's to the right of the steering column on the dash, which is very, very odd. Also an umbrella handbrake. Quite like that though, actually. That's nice. And we've got this Vauxhall Velox. I think this is called the E-Type Velox. Be about 1957. I did look it up actually. Very, very American-looking car, and you know, these were sort of mainstay of Vauxhall's range for many, many years. Look at the rear lights on this; extraordinary. All these little period details on something like this. It's not really me particularly. It's not the sort of thing that I'm very knowledgeable about, but you know, they do look rather impressive, don't they? Column change and everything like that, and something like that. Then this 6768. Triumph TR5 with the lovely Lucas mechanical fuel injection system. But that'd be fine, won't it? Next to it, a 1961 Austin A35 van. Now, the owner of this, normally when he comes to events at Lockheath, will bring his Austin A40 Farina. It's a Countryman from 67. This is a 61, so you'd think that's quite late in the A35 production, but not particularly. It actually is sort of in the middle, because these were made all the way until 1968, because for some reason they just kept them in production, even though the A40 came in and the 1100s and 1300s came in and everything like that, and the minis came in. They just kept selling these. So there we go. And we've got a couple of minis. Of course, you've got the pickup, which is on in every single Lockheath video. Gradual sort of rolling restoration and an attempt to keep the rust at bay. It's about 1981-82, this one. And then we squeeze through here. We see a much later mini. This one is a 2000. It's right at the end. It's a Cooper Sport. It's on a 500, which would be the last of the last, but it's quite late on in production from the last year on an X plate. And then finally we've got this Morris Minor. This is a 64 apparently. It looks all correct for that. Suffix letters were not compulsory on British number plates until 65, so this could be on the original plate actually. It's before the revisions that happened in October 64, including the changing of the steering wheel for just a 2-spoke one rather than the 3-spoke one that's got metal spokes on it. One thing I get confused about with these though is this car has wipers that meet in the middle. I thought that was deleted about 1962. I thought they actually were the conventional way round by then, but you know, I could be wrong. Maybe it's been imported from somewhere, I don't know. But there we go. That's about it that's here. And back to the other part of the video now.
So big overview is a sort of varied, very vague log this week, talking about the most scrap cars of 2024, and also looking at this little gathering I went to in Swanmore today with some classic cars. So a little bit of variation for you. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment below, and we shall see you again very soon for some very vague and not particularly interesting music.